All right. Well, when Todd told me we were going into Daniel and asked which piece I wanted to preach, I feel like it was cherry picking, like the fiery furnace. Snag that one, and what pastor doesn't want to get that one? We start in here. Before I begin, actually, if you can go to the first slide right quick. There are shirts for sale. There we go. Tune my heart to sing thy grace. The guy who will be leading worship down at Episode, they have some shirts that they're going to sell, and there's a pre-order, and I'm going to read my wife's text to make sure I don't mess it up. $10 now through Wednesday. If they want to go to Episode and purchase one, it's a little bit more. They can pay cash or check, made out to Micah Hasty, and you come see Holly about that. If you're interested, they have sizes small through extra large. All right. That all aside, if you can turn to Daniel chapter 3. Daniel chapter 3. And I'm going to pray and ask for the Father's help while we look into His Word. Father, thank you for this time to be together. We thank you for this family that we have because of you. I know that you love your children. You love to grow your children and to sanctify them through your word by the power of the Spirit. And I ask that this morning, as we study you and your ways and your thoughts in Daniel, I ask that you would grow us, that you would teach. Your word does not return void. So I ask for your mercy that you would help me, guide me, speak through me this morning. We ask all this in your Son's name. Amen. So we're going to go through this morning in Daniel chapter 3. We're going to look at the story of the fiery furnace. Now, the fiery furnace, the lion's den, similar circumstances. In both cases, it's because of persecution. People who are doing certainly what God wants them to do, where God wants them to be, being God's man for the hour, and yet they're suffering in the middle of it. And I'm going to steal my own thunder here a little bit. I don't want to focus on the fiery furnace or a lion's den for that matter, and enjoy these stories because they escape in the end. And I think I can convince you, if we'll look at Daniel, that the most miraculous thing that happens in the story is not that they come out without the smell of smoke on them. So if you will, we're going to work our way through chapter 3. We're going to get to the furnace. And in the furnace, we're going to meditate on what our Father is like in the middle of that through a handful of verses. So I'm going to briefly get us up through verses 1 through 12. The fast version of this, in case you missed this in Sunday school. After he has a vision that Daniel explains to him, which was last week, I think, and the head is made of gold, and you're the head, and then your kingdom ends. He didn't like that part of the vision. So he makes for himself a statue entirely of gold. I can't sit here and tell you his motivations, but it sure sounds like he's not interested in God's plan where his kingdom ends. Nebuchadnezzar is just planning to live forever. Here's the statue, and now it's all gold. Okay? And sets it up, and of course tells the people, all the people, that when you hear the music, you're going to bow down and worship the statue. Okay, is the fast version. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are certainly not the only people who aren't okay with this. They may be the only people that clearly had influence and were close to the king, and other people were excited to take them down. So, this is also a great passage if you're interested in, what place does civil disobedience have? And how do we operate when a government tells us one thing and God says another? And for my first magic trick of the morning, a libertarian is going to skip a sermon on civil disobedience. We're going to pick up in verse 13, when they've come to him and told him, hey, there's these three that are, kind of close to you. They've done very well for themselves. They're moving up in the ranks. We're kind of jealous. But there are these three who wouldn't worship. So Nebuchadnezzar, in a furious rage, commanded that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be brought. So they brought these men before the king. Nebuchadnezzar answered them and said to them, "Is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the golden image that I have set up? Now if you are ready, when you hear the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music, to fall down and worship the image that I have made, well and good. But if you do not worship, you shall immediately be cast into a burning fiery furnace. And who is the God who will deliver you out of my hands?" Okay, so real quick, before we keep going, who is the God that will deliver? I'm pretty sure I'm obeying. I think I'm doing what God wants me to do. And yet, there's suffering ahead. And to what do I turn for comfort? So this is just one of those, this is a constant question that as a Christian we can always have in the back of our minds. Psychologists even pose this to people who aren't saved. What do you turn to for comfort? And is it something that's hurtful? Well, as a Christian, you know where the story is going. We know we have an answer to this, but for a moment, before we go on to the rest of this story, what other things do you find yourself turned to for comfort when you're facing something, when you're in the middle of something, or when you've just been in the middle of something and you need to get beyond it in life? What are the things that we go to for comfort? Okay? And on at least some level, we could be convicted about some of those things, but let's continue on here. Who is the God who will deliver you? Where are you going to find comfort? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, "O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. If this be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of your hand, O king. But if not," or if you have NIV, it says, "even if he does not, be it known to you, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up." I think we should stop for a moment and consider what promises did they have? It's kind of interesting because they do walk up and say, well, our God can deliver. But if he does not, we don't know what God may have said to them beforehand. Okay? We don't know exactly what God may have revealed. It may be that God revealed something to them and they weren't sure. I think he meant that this is going to go badly, but we're going to get it. We don't know that. We know that no matter what they heard from God, they are now standing in front of a man who intends to throw them into a fiery furnace. That "even if" is quite a statement. Okay, so there's a couple things here. We don't presume to know or to understand God's response to persecution or suffering. Often here in the States, modern day politics and the powers that be, as you will, they don't favor us often. We can look at these situations and say, well, we're going to come out on top. We're going to have faith, and God will protect his children. Does he always? We can't simply assume, well, I'm the good guy, so it's going to turn out okay, because I'm righteous and I'm God's child. If anything, that's what the Jews thought. God must like me. I'm his child, and I follow the rules. So granted, things are going to turn out okay. They do still get thrown into the furnace. We'll come back to this, but also, this idea that, well, God just wants me to be happy. There's a reason that for some of us this story may be a little hard to look at someone who's going to go through something and get delivered. when in your personal life you may be facing something and not sure if God will deliver, like they said, even if. Okay? In your personal life, you might be in the middle of something now that I don't feel very delivered from this. Okay? You may have just gone through something that, well, why didn't God just get me out of that? Even if we're not going to find comfort in something else, we're going to cling to this, even if there is still suffering. We also don't presume to understand God's reasoning. And if you're in the suffering right now, or if you're facing the suffering, or if right now you're questioning, why did God allow me to go through that? You're going to see this from one angle, but also if you're the one who's there for someone, you need to hear this. We don't presume to know God's reasoning. Not even in the Bible. We don't look at this and say, oh, well, I see why God did this. It was because this and this. These are some of the, you'll see some of the results of this story. You'll see a little bit of the why. But you don't know all of it. By that I mean to say, if you are the one who is suffering, do not assume, well, there's some simple reason and I'll know it later. You might not. You might simply need to say, even if, I will cling to him and suffer through. And if you're looking at it from the outside, we don't go to someone and say, well, from the outside, I've got this verse, and this verse, and I'm looking at your life, and I'm pretty sure this is what God's trying to do. I don't mean that we shouldn't be encouraging. I don't mean that we shouldn't preach the gospel to people who are suffering. What I mean is, if you read through the book of Job, there are some good sermons on sin in the book of Job. Like, they're good. You read through it and this guy's theology is square. And you get to the end and God says, you're wrong. You came to comfort your friend Job and you thought you knew my reasons. You thought you knew my reasons. And as humans, when we read the book of Job, his friend's trying to comfort him, it sounds like this is good. Like I could hear this on a Sunday morning. And God says, no, but not in this case. You're not me. So all that to say, be cautious when you comfort. Have you ever heard of the butterfly effect? The idea that a butterfly can flap its wings on one side of the world, and that slightly alters an air current, which turns into something, which turns into something, which eventually turns into a tornado in Appomattox. Okay, that idea that every little subatomic particle is creating a million factors. And consider for a moment that God controls them all. You and I can look at a situation, can look at hurt, can look at suffering, can think, I'm doing all these things right. I feel like I'm the good guy in this story, and yet there is suffering. And God may let you in on one or two reasons. At best, when your day is going according to your plans, okay, this was certainly not according to their plan, but when your day is going according to your plan, your decisions to do what you do and say what you say and think the way you think, at best you probably have one or two reasons, maybe three, that you can put together to make sense of your life and why you do what you do. God has a billion reasons, and he might let us in on a few of them. And I don't want to say that to simply say, well, God has reasons you don't get, so suffer. And just roll our eyes and, okay, that's not the encouragement we're looking for. Let's keep going. Picking up in verse 19. Then Nebuchadnezzar was filled with fury, and the expression of his face was changed against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He ordered the furnace heated 7 times more than it was usually heated, and he ordered some of the mighty men of his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and to cast them into the burning fiery furnace. Then these men were bound in their cloaks, their tunics, their hats, and their other garments. And they were thrown into the burning fiery furnace because the king's order was urgent and the furnace overheated. The flame of the fire killed those men who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell bound into the burning fiery furnace. Then King Nebuchadnezzar was astonished and rose up in haste. He declared to his counselors, "Did we not cast 3 men bound into the fire?" They answered and said to the king, "True, O king." He answered and said, "But I see 4 men walking in the midst of the fire, and they are not hurt. And the appearance of the 4th is like a son of the gods." And that's as far as we're going to go in Daniel today, for a reason. A lot of people love this story because, well, they get out and they don't even smell like smoke. And in all honesty, some of you, that'll get you right here, because what you've just been through, you didn't. And it hurts to read a story of, okay, well, were they doing something better than me? Like, what? Why can they go through this and they come out wholly intact and it's fine and I didn't? Why all these stories about deliverance? Okay. So let's just stop right here in verse 25. And let me convince you that this is an amazing story without them ever getting out. They do. But let me show you what's already happened. Because some of you in your life feel like you are still in the furnace. This is a good reason to stop here for a minute. Some of you don't know if there's an easy end in sight to the furnace you're going through right now. Some of you may have lost someone else in the furnace. So I don't want to just skip to, they were delivered. Let's sing. Let's look at a few things that are happening here. Okay? We don't know God's reasons. And we don't always know exactly what he's going to do. Sometimes he lets us off easy. Sometimes we have funerals. But here's what we do know. God is not passive. He is working. I'm going to skip for a moment up to Ephesians chapter 1. Ephesians chapter 1, verse 11. And for my second magic trick of the morning, you're going to see a Calvinist skip right over the word predestined and just skate right on by it. In him we have obtained an inheritance, having been predestined according to the purpose of him who works all things according to the counsel of his will. Let's hang on that for a second. If you're in it, if you're facing it, or if you're just past it, according to the purpose, not the accident, the purpose of him who works, not him who knows, not him who observes, him who works. All things. That's a nice, big, vague term. I like that. Things. Give you a big old Venn diagram. Here's things. That's his circle. All things according to his purpose. All things according to the counsel of his will. Sorry, I backed up a verse there. According to the counsel of his will. It goes the way he wants it to go. Sometimes hurtful things, but it goes the way he wants it to go. At best, I'll let you say he allows things. All things. For a moment before we keep going, consider that this means that painful things, according to his purpose, according to his counsel, and at first, I don't want to feel like God is on that side. But let me give you the alternative. Would you rather believe that the hurtful things were coming from somewhere else? Does that make sense? If I've got to believe that there's hurt, I would rather know and trust that it's coming from my Father who loves me. Okay. Then briefly, we can look back at Daniel. He's not passive, he's working. The very end of the chapter here, we can go ahead and look. Therefore, the end of chapter 3, I make a decree, any people, nation, or language that speaks anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be torn limb from limb, and their houses laid in ruins, for there is no other God who is able to rescue in this way. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. So there was another whole purpose going on here. For one, if you weren't worshiping the statue, Because just like these three, you were convicted about that, and I'm sure there were many Jews who were also convicted. It's just, what's the fun of burning up little guy here? I want to get the three people in the ladder ahead of me in authority. That's right. There were probably many lives saved in this. Okay. He's not passive. He's working. And I mean by that, you can see one of his purposes here, which means that God is not sitting around waiting for favorable circumstances. All things according to his purpose. Go to the next slide here. God is not remote. He is intimate. Okay? It's not enough for me to simply think that there's intelligent design and that something likes to mess with things. Okay? It's not enough to simply think that the universe is a video game and God is kind of good at making things go the way he likes. Like he's throwing people in a furnace and then giggling about it. He's active, working, and he's intimate. Let's skip up ahead to Matthew real quick. Matthew chapter 10, verses 28, 31 right here. Matthew chapter 10. And do not fear those who kill the body but cannot kill the soul. Rather fear him who can destroy both soul and body in hell. And he's about to send them out and he's warning them, you're going to be persecuted. So this is a perfect verse to cover what Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are standing in right now. Are not two sparrows sold for a penny, and not one of them will fall to the ground apart from your Father? But even the hairs of your head are all numbered. Fear not, therefore. You are of more value than many sparrows. Okay, so real quick, he doesn't just say that he values you. It's hinting that he values you, particularly you, very much. In case you're in doubt, flip to the Psalm here that's listed, 139. Psalm 139. O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know when I sit down and when I rise up. You discern my thoughts from afar. You search out my path and my lying down and are acquainted with all my ways. Even before a word is on my tongue, behold, O Lord, you know it altogether. You hem me in behind and before and lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is high. I cannot attain it. Where shall I go from your spirit? Okay. In whatever furnace you're in right now, or whatever you're facing, just so we're clear, this kind of wondering and like the lonely kind of questioning, is he hearing this? Is he? Okay. Whether you happen to feel like it or not, this would be a good verse to cling to. Where shall I go from your spirit, or where shall I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me. And if I say, surely the darkness shall cover me, and the light about me be night, even the darkness is not dark to you. The night is bright as the day, for the darkness is as light with you. Intimate. Follows you, holds you. And if you're questioning, well, is he hearing me? You ever get that feeling like I'm just talking to the ceiling or something? He knows your thoughts that you have not thought yet. He knows your words you have not yet spoken. He hears. And a couple references we didn't even have up there, but we have a great high priest who sympathizes with us. He's been tempted. He's experienced hunger. He's experienced betrayal. He's experienced loss. He has wept at a tomb. Whatever furnace you've been in, you have a God who not only loves you in particular intimately, but he has a knowledge like you do of that hurt. He was in the furnace with them. This is good. Go to the next one here. God is not indifferent. He is for his children. Okay? I'm going to jump up to Isaiah real quick and just give you a couple verses. I want to know that he's working. I really want to know that these things are under his control. When there are circumstances that I cannot control, which if you're honest is way more of your life than you care to admit. When there are things that are beyond your control, it's very comforting to know that all things he is working. It's even better when you look at he knows me better than I know me. He's working intimately, and he's for me. Isaiah 41, in verse 10, fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. Romans 8:28, and most of you will probably have this one memorized. And we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to his purpose. Again, it's a nice big category, all things. Okay, so one of the hard things to accept is all things includes what hurt you. And again, this is one of those instances where we have to look at what would happen to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego if they were not delivered from the furnace. They would have experienced an even greater deliverance. He is for his children. He saved the nation of Israel all over again in this. 3 Jews won't worship. You know they weren't the only 3 that wouldn't. And if they're going to get it, this is going to draw a line right down the middle of the nation. And there's going to be a Holocaust. Wait, but God was like, no, the Holocaust is going to happen later. He's for his children. It wasn't just playing history like some fantastic video game, okay? So, let me tell you a quick story then. A man named Thomas Hawks, okay? Loads of instances of God walking with his people through things, but I want to come a little closer to our era of history. A man named Thomas Hawks who also faced the flames. He refused to allow them to baptize his son into the Catholic Church because he insisted that God defines the gospel, man does not. So when he is sentenced to be burned at the stake, other members of the church talk to him, and they want to know, because this is a very real fear. If they're taking you, they could take me. I feel like I'm doing what God wants. Won't God just swoop in and make this all good? No. There's martyrs all throughout history. But when they talked to him beforehand, they wanted to know. They said, listen, because this is a very real fear, when you're at the stake, in the final moments, we want to know as best we can, is it bearable? Is he with you? So he told them, in that moment, I'm going to put my hands together. He was burned without his hands tied, that I'm going to put my hands together. If it's bearable, and if his presence is there, and if he can stand up under it. They gave him one last chance, and he said, to recant, he said, no, my Lord, that I will not, for if I had 100 bodies, I would suffer them all to be torn to pieces, rather than I will abjure and recant. In his final moments, see, when he was consumed entirely, he raised his hands up above his head to make sure that they could see him, and he put his hands together 3 times. And he was not delivered. Not from that. He did not walk out of the stake untouched without the smell of smoke on him. But he was with his Father. In that moment, he could tell those watching, in the middle of that suffering, it is bearable. I'm not alone. He is with me. So for some of you right now who have just been through the furnace, or like I said, some who have lost someone in the furnace, to look at this and say, well, I don't always get what Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego got. I don't always get out the other end unhurt. The best part of this story is verse 25. But there are 4 men walking in the midst of the fire, and they are not hurt, and the appearance of the fourth is like a son of the gods. They're not alone in it. So one more time, if we can reiterate these 3 points. He is not passive. He is working. He is not remote. He is intimate. He is not indifferent to your suffering. He is for his children. I'm going to have Aaron and Sarah come up. We've got a song ready for you guys that I really like. And it's the first time in a long time there's been anything just on regular Christian radio that I was like, man, those lyrics are actually good. I like this one. And as we begin, I want to open this up to you that if you are in the middle of something now, or if you have been, or if you're facing something, and you're looking at what will deliver me out of this, what can I go to for comfort? He is working. He is intimate. He is for you. I don't know if you just need to turn to someone next to you and say, hey, this is what hurts. And I need prayer. But I want you to see these stories, and I want you to see your story differently because of this. Understand, this is not an amazing story because they get out. The furnace wasn't just worth it because they survived. It was worth it because they walked with God. So, I don't know where you're at this morning, but whether you're in it or whether you're watching someone go through it, He is enough. He's enough. He's with you in it. His children never go through it alone. But He loves you in the middle of it. Not just you in the middle of this, that He is with you. That whether you experience deliverance the way that you want to, or even if you don't, that you are not alone.
Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. I couldn't earn it, and I don't deserve it. Still you give yourself away.